Before I start, of course, I'd like to give thanks, honor, and praise to the great I am that I am, that allowed me to wake up this morning, gave me air and voice to speak to you today. Everything that I have comes from him. And in addition to that, I definitely want to take time to thank my beautiful wife, Sister Tara, and my son Xavier and daughter Michelle. They have supported me tirelessly through all my Messiah travels, literal travels to all over the place as well. So I thank you very much for your support. Okay, this time is of the essence. I know we got repass to get to. Let me get right to it. All right. Before I get into the meat of my talk today, I want to lay a little background. You probably heard mentioned during my intro about the Philaxis Society. And I want to bring that up because a lot of the reference material that I'm going to talk about comes from that organization. Some may know about the Philaxis, but some may not. So what is the Philaxis Society? It is an international society founded by Prince Hall Masons, but it includes Masons from all over the world, with the specific desire to receive and dispense Masonic knowledge, especially regarding Prince Hall and Prince Hall Masonry. And that said, there are different levels to the Philaxis, and this is not a presentation on the Philaxis, but I want to mention, when you first joined as a regular Mason, you were just a member of the Philaxis, and after maybe you have an article published or show something showing that you are dispensing Masonic knowledge, you may be recommended and be elected to be an honorary fellow, which is the distinction I hold. But then there's this elite group, the creme de la creme, so to speak, that there are only 15 in number at any one time, and those are actual fellows. And I mention that because it reflects positively on this great jurisdiction of Illinois, because out of thousands of people all over the world in the Philaxis, our jurisdiction has had 2 actual fellows, because there's only be 15, so someone unfortunately has to pass away, and then someone else is elected to that position. And our jurisdiction has had 2. The first was none other than the late Honorable Brian L. Abrams, whom our local chapter is named after. And the second is someone that was also very instrumental in the establishment of that chapter, none other than Right Worshipful Brother Dale Andrews, Cornerstone, 91. And so I think that it is a testament to our jurisdiction and the importance we place on Masonic education due to the great leadership that we have, that we've achieved this distinct honor within the Philaxis Society. So that being said, again, most of the books that I'm going to reference were written not just by members of the Philaxis, but by active fellows. So these are the people that are the pioneers of Masonic research. Not everybody that's a scholar in Masonry is a member of Philaxis, but most scholars. All right, that being said, let's get into the main course. It's the late 1700s in Boston, Massachusetts. Most of the 16,000 residents were white, with a small contingent of free blacks, numbering about 800. Now keep in mind, there were no laws that protected this small collective of free black residents. They could be captured at any time by slavers and taken either back into captivity for those who had obtained their freedom or taken into captivity. There were no education system for their children, no such thing as Chicago public schools or Boston public schools at that time. And keep in mind, during this time, there were roughly 500,000 of their brothers and sisters still living in chains. Okay, so while this small group is surviving in Boston, most people of African descent are enslaved. And so, in thinking about this, it occurred to me, what in the world gave Prince Hall and those 14 other men who we a lot of times refer to as the immortal 15, the courage to not just stand up to be men, but then to take that next upright, regular step and dare to desire to be Masons? What helped them to overcome the fear they probably, I would assume, had in those conditions? So we'll come back to that question a little later in the talk. What I first want to talk about is, who was Prince Hall, our founder? What were his contributions to his community, to society at large, and to this country? And then finally, I know it's covered a little bit, but I want to delve a little more into why we celebrate Prince Hall Americanism today? What purpose does it serve within our fraternity? As Masons, we are builders. Some of us actual operative builders. Myself, I can't put together anything. So most of us are speculative builders. But nevertheless, as builders, we know that one of the most important parts of any structure is its foundation. And before a foundation can be established or built upon, any rubbish or debris needs to be cleared away. That said, I will start by using my pickaxe, spade, and crowbar to remove the rubbish of inaccurate information, what some may call in these modern times fake news, about Prince Hall, before I will attempt to erect the superstructure of his life and recount his deeds. As I mentioned, there's been much false information circulated over the last century related to our founder, Prince Hall, most of which is attributed to one man, Past Grand Master William Grimshaw, of the most worshipful Prince Hall Grand Lodge of D.C. He wrote a book in 1903 titled The Official History of Freemasonry Among Colored People in North America. Grimshaw meant well. Okay, most historians agree he meant well. He wasn't a scoundrel. He was looking to uplift the image of Prince Hall and black people at a time when we were facing a lot of adversities. Okay, black codes, this is before civil rights and all that, so he meant well. But nevertheless, so in the last 50 years or so, a lot of the inaccurate information has been disproven by Masonic scholars, most of which members of the Phylaxis, such as the founder of the Phylaxis Society, Joseph A. Waltz, in one of his books, The Start of Prince Hall Masonic Quiz Book. He wrote many, this is just one. Another book that I will be referencing heavily during my discussion today is Prince Hall Life and Legacy by Dr. Charles Wesley, also a fellow of the Phylaxis Society. May he rest in peace. One of the most recent additions to the story is The Prince Hall Story Revisited by John B. Williams, fellow of the Phylaxis and President Emeritus. And finally, I just want to showcase a book from my beloved very own Right Worship Brother Dale Lamar Andrews, Indignation, a book on John G. Jones, but I'll also be citing information in that book as well. All right, that said, let's get right into it. The first thing that Grimshaw put out, that's been circulated, is that Prince Hall was born in Bridgetown, Barbados. Most of you have probably heard of that. However, Dr. Charles Wesley, again in his book, Prince Hall Life and Legacy, states, Grimshaw also wrote after this, stating that Prince Hall was born in 1748, Bridgetown, Barbados, for which there is no documentation. Joseph Waltz in the Masonic Quiz Book, right on page 1, states, the place of his birth is unknown. Some have speculated that he was born in Barbados, West Indies. There is no evidence to support this. Dr. Charles Wesley then went on and talked about that Prince Hall could have been born in Africa and brought here as a slave. But he also could have been born in England. And what leads Dr. Wesley and other historians to think that is that there was a letter that Prince Hall wrote, and he was talking about the chaplain of African Lodge by the name of John Morant, Merrick, maybe you mispronounce it. And when he was talking about Brother Merrick, he said he's from home, and everybody knew that Brother Merrick was from England. So that's where that reference, and maybe Prince Hall was from England. But the bottom line is, as of right now, based on the latest information, we simply don't know. Number 2, now mind you, I just pulled some of the things that Grimshaw put out there that are inaccurate. I don't want to keep you here all day, so this is not an all-conclusive list. I recommend you get the book and read it for yourself. So I just got a few points, we get out of here. All right, so Prince Hall, he was born in 1748. We do not know when he was born. According to Dr. Wesley, his death certificate stated that he was 72 years old at the age of his death in 1807. We know without a doubt when he died. However, Prince Hall stated himself in a deposition roughly 4 months before he died that he was about 70. So it's clear that he wasn't quite sure how old he was, which is not uncommon. I mean, I know my great-great-grandmother Didn't know exactly when she was born. Records weren't really kept well. We're talking 17. All right. So we just simply don't know how old he was, but he was about 70 years old when he died. All right. Next one. Prince Hall was the son of Thomas Prince Hall, an English leather merchant. And his wife was a Negro woman of French descent. Hollywood Francais. Oh, that sounds good. That's a great sounding story, isn't it? Unfortunately, according to Dr. Wesley, there is no documentary evidence that Prince Hall, Wesley states no substantiation of this assertion has been found on page 14 of Prince Hall Life and Legacy. So it appeared again, Grimshaw meant well, but it looks like this is something that he may have made up. If there's documentary evidence out there, it hasn't been found yet. I can understand the reason why Grimshaw would have wanted to do this, because he wanted to prove without a shadow of a doubt that Prince Hall was not a slave, and there was a whole argument being used by the white Masons at that time to show that we were illegitimate. He meant well, but yet and still he put out information that he could not prove, he did not have sources for. So just understand that. We don't know who his father was, who his mother was, we don't know where he was from. All right. Next, that Prince Hall became a ordained minister. On page 22, Dr. Charles Wesley states, there is no documentary evidence that Prince Hall was a Methodist minister, nor the pastor of a church. And then Dr. Wesley goes on to state, this may be a figment of Grimshaw's imagination, end quote. There is evidence in Prince Hall Life and Legacy that he was a member of a congregation. Of course, he was a God-fearing man. In a deposition, Prince Hall stated he was a member of Congregational Church under Reverend Andrew Croswell from about 1762. And finally, the last point, but not the only thing, just the last few points that I pulled. That Prince Hall was a soldier in the Revolutionary War. Grimshaw stated in his book in 1903 that Prince Hall entered the Revolutionary War in February 1776, joining Captain Benjamin Dillingham's company and also serving in Captain Wellbore's company. So the interesting thing about this is that as of today, there's no conclusive evidence that our Prince Hall, we're named after, start off in Turkey, served in the Revolutionary War. Dr. Charles Wesley states again in Prince Hall Life and Legacy, says citations from the Revolutionary War reports at the citations from the Revolutionary War records at the National Archives leave us in a quandary, for they show relationships only to the names of Prince Halls, plural, without any specific designation or respect of the men so designated as Prince Hall. There were 8 men named Prince Hall, and one of them could have been ours. Not saying he didn't serve. It's just we don't have anything to draw that direct link. So I'll use this point as my transitional point to go from the things that we either know not to be true or I'll say have yet to be proven to the things that we know for sure, the things that we can say proudly about our family. When somebody says, oh, you're a Prince Hall maker, who was Prince Hall? Things that we can tell them proudly and say, oh, this is who Prince Hall was, and these are the things that he did. Because we should be proud of these things in my opinion. The first, and we know for sure that Prince Hall was a patriot. Now, you may, and that he was willing to put his life on the line in service of this country as well as the members of African lives. That made me think what Brother Peter just said. You're not sure if he served in the war. Maybe he was there, maybe not. How can you say definitively that he was a patriot? Glad you asked that question. So Dr. Charles Wesley, again, Prince Hall Life and Legacy, gives us documentary evidence that Prince Hall wrote the governor of Massachusetts, James Baldwin, volunteering the Brothers of African Lodge to serve in the militia to quell Shays' rebellion in 1786. Daniel Shay was the captain in the war, and he started a rebellion. So that's just, let me just paint a little context here. Again, the Revolutionary War had just recently been fought, 1776 on. The colonies rebelled against England because they were being overtaxed, right? So they rebelled. All right. We went to war, America was formed, and then our new government used the bright idea, hey, let's do the same thing the British just did. Let's tax the heck out of these guys. Right? The same people that just fought because they were being overtaxed. So Shay said, you must have forgotten who we are. Grabbed the musket, started loading up, and they formed a rebellion. And so it was this rebellion that Prince Hall volunteered himself and the Brothers of African Lodge 459, or at that time it would have still been African Lodge number 1, to fight. Now, there's no record in here as to if that actually happened and the rebellion was squashed, but it showed that he was a patriot, that he believed in this country, and he was willing to die to maintain the order of this country. Next, that Prince Hall was an entrepreneur. We know that he was a leather dresser. As a matter of fact, again, in Prince Hall Life and Legacy, there's documents that show a receipt of Prince Hall selling some leather drum heads to the Revolutionary Army. So not only was an entrepreneur, he supported the Revolutionary War. Maybe he did it while he was fighting the war. Maybe he was a civilian. Again, not 100% sure. So he was an entrepreneur. He was also he was a leather dresser, and he was also a caterer. So again, that's something to celebrate. Think about it. A black man in the 1700s, while millions of black men and women, unfortunately for that matter, were slaves, being an entrepreneur. To me, that's something to celebrate and emulate. Next, at Prince Hall, we know that he was a champion of education. On October 17, 1787, which coincidentally was the same year that we received the charter from the Grand Lodge of England modern, changing it from African Lodge number 1 to African Lodge number 459 that was spoken of earlier. In that same year, he and others sent a petition to the Senate and House of Representatives of Massachusetts, urging that means be provided for the education of colored people. Unfortunately, no provisions were made from the Senate. But Prince Hall being undeterred, and the members of African Lodge being men, they persevered on, they pressed on. And so 5 years later, Prince Hall gave an address to African Lodge, and I'll just read a little excerpt that some of this could a little bit about us today. But he says, let us lay by our recreations and all superfluities, so that we may have that money to educate our rising generation, which is spent in these follies. So basically, what he was saying is, okay, maybe take some of that money you spend it on drinking and gambling, which he referenced, and take some of that money and let's put it toward educating our children. Which I think our jurisdiction does a good job of supporting education, but there's always room for more, at least I know personally there is. All right, so this was the tone he set. Hey, let's take some of the money that we spend on frivolous things, use it to educate our kids. So keeping that idea pushing forward, it's now 1800. What does Prince Hall do? He leads by example. He opens up his home for the first school to teach the colored children of the free blacks living in Boston at that time. He put his money and his home where his mouth was. That school was later moved, according to Dr. Wesley, to the home of Primus Hall, his son. So we know that he was a supporter of education, and I would say he started the first public school, at least within the context of our community. Finally, and again, not the only point that we could talk about, but my last point is that Prince Hall was an abolitionist. He fought against slavery. On January 13, 1777, Prince Hall and 7 other men signed a petition to the House of Representatives of Massachusetts calling for the abolition of slavery. And when I read that, I kind of thought about it, to be honest. I was like, wow, I've never written my congressman or senator about anything. Right. And here's Prince Hall in the 1700s with a quill and feather and all that, writing to improve the condition of our community. Okay, I think I got some work to do personally. I won't speak for myself. And in addition to that, in 1787, again, coincidentally, same year that the charter was delivered from the Grand Lodge of England, 3 free black men were seized on the city streets and carried aboard a vessel in the harbor, placed in irons, and transported into slavery. And this is recount this again, page 72, Prince Hall, Life and Legacy. And to make a long story short, basically, Prince Hall wrote letters again to the senators and congressmen, along with some other white abolitionists that would join him in the fight. And through the stink that they made in commotion, they were able to get those brothers returned, which is a fantastic thing. Yeah, that is something worth That's definitely something worth celebrating. That if you think about it, our founder, through his efforts, actually helped to save the lives of 3 men. One of them who was a member of African Lodge at 459 at that time. So now, I'd like to, as they say, instead of giving you some words from our sponsor, I'd like to give you some words from our founder. Getting this from Prince Hall, Life and Legacy. This is a charge that Prince Hall gave to African Lodge. He gave 2 charges that were published at the time and have survived to this day. This is the first one. He says, I shall therefore endeavor to show you the duty of a Mason. And the first thing is that he believes in one supreme being, that he is the great architect of this invisible world, and that he governs all things here below by his almighty power, and his watchful eye is over all our works. Next duty he identifies. Again, we must be good subjects to the laws of the land in which we dwell, giving honor to the lawful governors and magistrates. You can tell this was written in the 1700s. Nobody says magistrates in America anymore. Magistrate, giving honor to whom honor is due, and that we may have no hand in any plots of conspiracies or rebellions. And again, this is 1792. This is after Shays' Rebellion. So he's already put his money where his mouth is. And we're not going to be a part of it. We're going to support this country, even though at the same time it's unjust because the rest of our brothers and sisters are enslaved. But we're going to continue to fight for this thing. Okay. Next point he mentioned. He said the next thing, duty of a Mason, the next thing is love and benevolence to all the family of mankind as God's make and creation. Therefore, we ought to love them all. For love of hatred is of the whole kind. For if I love a man for the sake of the image of God, which is on him, I must love all. For he made all and upholds all. Therefore, he says, therefore he will help and assist all fellow men in distress. Let them be of what color or nation they may be. So again, Prince Hall is acknowledging that we got, at the time, slavery still going on, and we should still somehow through the love of God find a way to love even those slave owners, which is hard for me to even say, but that's a challenge that Prince Hall placed before us, and really the challenge that God places before us. Next point, he says another thing, which is the duty of a Mason, is that he pays a strict regard to the stated meaning of his lodge. Okay. For masonry is of a progressive nature and must be attended to if he ever intends to be a good Mason. For the man that thinks that because he hath been made a Mason and is called so, and at the same time will willfully neglect to attend his lodge, he may be assured he will never make a good Mason. Nor ought he to be looked upon as a good member of the craft. For if his example was followed, where would be the lodge? Now, as they say, as we say in modern times, from the 1700s to 2024, shots fired. Now, those shots are not hitting anybody in this room because we're all dedicated Masons here. But I will say this again, as Masonry is an internal journey, as I did my own self-reflection, yes, I regularly attend our meetings. I was in Plum Line State meeting right here in this room last night. But there are some nights when I'm like, I'm a past pastor. Nobody, I don't really need to be there. Maybe I'll just sit this one out. I have those nights. And so as I'm reading the words of our founder, I'm like, yeah, even when you start to feel like they get your tail up, jump in your heated car and drive on in. Because these brothers were making the meetings on chariots and buggies, and some of us don't want to ride in air-conditioned cars to the meeting. So I'm just saying, I want to speak for myself. All right, last, another thing of Mason I'll thought to observe is that he should lend his helping hand to a brother in distress, and of course, for a sister, and relieve him. This we may do in various ways. So as I was reading the words of our founder from 1792, I was thinking, if he could somehow, if a portal opened up, like science fiction movies, he could look into the future and see our fraternity today, what would he think? Would he be proud? Would he be happy? Would he be dismayed? And so I could reflect on Prince Hall worldwide, because we are worldwide information, but I decided, let's just kind of take a look at our jurisdiction. Let's just kind of narrow it, bring it home. So, in thinking about this, I thought, how do we measure up to the duties that Prince Hall has identified for Mason? Well, to start, our jurisdiction followed in the footsteps of Prince Hall in fighting against slavery. As documented by White Merciful Brother Daryl Andrews, Cornerstone 91, in his book, Masonic Abolitionists, Freemasonry and the Underground Railroad, he documented that our three founding lodges, North Star, G.T. Watson, and Central Lodge, served as the stops on the Underground Railroad, and members of those lodges were conductors on the Underground Railroad. So, one of them being, including our first Grand Master, Benjamin F. Rogers of Central Lodge. I don't know about you, but when I first heard that information, actually, it was when our Grand Master, who was Grand Lecturer at the time, did a presentation, and he presented that information. And I was new to Prince Hall, and I was blown away. I was like, wow, this Grand Lodge was the Underground Railroad? Man, I didn't know that. And to me, that's something that I think not only every Prince Hall Mason should know, especially in Illinois, but that we should be able to articulate to anyone that asks us about our fraternity. Or what have we ever done for the community? Oh, we did a lot. We've done a lot. We helped establish the community by helping our brothers and sisters during that time get the food. Next thing. Members of our jurisdiction were instrumental in the creation of Providence Hospital. Okay, and as Prince Hall was concerned about the health and well-being of the community at that time, we followed in that trend. Again, Right Worshipful Brother Dale Andrews documents in his latest book how Right Worshipful Brother Theodore Wellington Jones, the nephew of John Jones and brother of John G. Jones, was instrumental. He worked on the board of Providence. He worked along with Dr. Daniel L. Williams and also Booker T. Washington. Matter of fact, there's a picture in this book with them all kind of sitting together. And again, Booker T. was a Prince Hall Mason. So again, our jurisdiction had a part in the founding of Providence Hospital, which has saved thousands of lives in our community right here in the city. Again, Prince Hall listed the duty of a Mason that he should lend a helping hand to a brother in distress and relieve him. So in that vein, our jurisdiction decided to build a Masonic home for its members who could no longer take care of themselves. There were a few iterations of the home, but the main building was built in 1904 in Rock Island, Illinois. It was dedicated by Grand Master Henry Burrs, who was also from Rock Island. This home was maintained throughout the 21st century. I couldn't really find out when exactly we had to shut it down, but I know it was maintained for much of the 21st century. That our members, when we got older, if you could no longer take care of yourself, you had a place to go. Next, our Grand Lodge, next point. Our Grand Lodge has given away thousands of dollars in scholarships to our youth to further their education. Just as our founder addressed, admonished in his address, saying, hey, take some of your money that you wasted and use it to educate our children. We've done that through the Grand Lodge, through the Order of Eastern Star, through all of our independent and appointed bodies. We have donated thousands, and I know that we will continue to donate and support the education of our youth that we see represented here in the back. Again, regarding the health, our Grand Lodge, through the works of many, but kind of spearheaded by past Grand Master Ron G. Simon, we now have the prostate walk, celebrating men's health. And then finally, the last thing I mentioned, because there's a lot we could talk about, is we have our bridge program, which is there, again, to help aid and assist if a brother or sister falls on hard times. So, as I thought about all with our organization as it stands today. Now, don't get me wrong. Surely there are areas of improvement. But I think that he would be amazed and happy to see what we have become. And that we are carrying out the duties that he identified of Masons over 200 years ago. Now, I'll go back to that question I asked at the beginning. I wonder what gave Prince Hall and the other members of the Immortal 15 the courage to stand up and demand to be seen as men and to then be Masons. And so, my answer actually comes from a movie. I don't know if those of you who may be familiar with the Hunger Games franchise, but the main bad guy in there is a guy called President Snow. And one of his quotes from the movie is that hope is the only thing stronger than fear. A little hope is effective. A lot of hope is dangerous. So it's definitely dangerous, the hope in my mind that Prince Hall had and those other members of the Immortal 15. But then it kind of came to my mind, okay, well, what gave them this hope? What gave them hope? And the answer to that to me is in the first thing that he identified as a duty in Mason, belief in God. It was his faith in God that gave him and those brothers and the sisters that stood with him, even though the order of Eastern Star wasn't created then, we know they did not do it by themselves. We know that the women were standing right there with them in this fight. But it was that hope in God that gave them the courage, that allowed them to overcome the fear to stand up and fight and improve their lives. And I would say, as we sit here in 2024, and as a community, as a city, as a nation, we have some challenges ahead. There's some interesting things going on in the world. Automation, robotics, you name it. A lot of things that can give us pause and trepidation of fear. So I'd like to remind all of us to renew our faith in God. And that faith in God will give us hope, that will give us the courage to face whatever challenges lie ahead and take this great Grand Lodge and organization into the future. Finally, I'll leave you with this. I posited the question, what's the real significance of Prince Hall Americanism Day? And to answer that, I'm going to leave you with the words of Grandmaster Howard Woods, who was Grandmaster of the Most Worshipful Prince Hall Grand Lodge of Arkansas. He's actually an honorary Grand Master of this jurisdiction, and he gave this address years ago. So in essence, I'm kind of honoring him and following in his footsteps. This is from the website for the Grand Lodge of Arkansas. He says, as the Christian has a revival, the Muslim a pilgrimage to Mecca, so do Prince Hall Masons have revivals, and they are called Prince Hall Americanism Day. Celebrated on or as close to September 12th each year. It is a time for the Prince Hall Mason to take stock of his life, renew his faith in God, country, and fraternity, which will also include his neighbor. It is a time to renew his faith in God, his patriotism to his country, and his duty to mankind. It is in the truest sense a Masonic revival. Thank you for your time.